During an autopsy of twin bodies from 1945, Dr. Samuel Harris heard children laughing. The sound was faint at first, almost imperceptible against the clinical silence of the morgue. But as he positioned his scalpel above the chest of the first body, the laughter grew louder, emanating from both cadavers simultaneously. Dr. Harris stumbled backward, dropping his instrument with a metallic clang that echoed through the room. His assistant, Dr. Eleanor Reed, rushed to his side, concerned by his ashen face and trembling hands. "Samuel, what happened?" she asked, steadying him. He could only point at the examination table where the two small bodies lay, their skin waxy and gray, lips blue, eyes closed. "They laughed, Eleanor," he whispered hoarsely. "The dead children laughed." The twin bodies had been discovered in an abandoned laboratory complex outside of Berlin 3 days earlier. Allied forces had been cataloging evidence of Nazi scientific atrocities when they stumbled upon a sealed concrete room. Inside were preserved specimens and countless files, the remnants of Josef Mengele's twisted legacy. Among them were 2 children, identical twin boys approximately 10 years old, preserved in a state that defied decomposition. According to military records, they had been dead for nearly 6 months, yet their bodies showed virtually no signs of decay. This unprecedented preservation alone would have warranted scientific investigation. But what truly disturbed the soldiers who found them was something else entirely: the twins' facial expressions. Both boys wore identical smiles. Dr. Samuel Harris was a forensic pathologist with impeccable credentials. After graduating top of his class from Harvard Medical School, he had dedicated his career to examining the victims of history's darkest chapter, documenting Nazi medical crimes for the Nuremberg trials. His reputation for clinical detachment and scientific rigor made him the natural choice to examine these unusual specimens. Eleanor Reed, his assistant and a brilliant physician in her own right, had worked alongside him for 3 years. Neither had ever encountered anything that shook their professional composure, until now. "I know what I heard," Harris insisted, as Eleanor guided him to a chair. "It was children laughing, not just any laughter, but joyful, playful. It came from both bodies simultaneously." Eleanor glanced nervously at the twins. Their peaceful expressions seemed to mock the clinical sterility of the examination room. "Samuel, that's impossible," she said softly. "These children have been dead for months. Perhaps it was a sound from another room, or—" She stopped mid-sentence as one of the bodies twitched, a small, almost imperceptible movement of the right hand. Both doctors froze, staring in disbelief. What happened next defied everything known to medical science. The right hand of the first twin slowly raised itself 3 inches off the examination table, fingers splayed as if reaching for something, before dropping back down with a soft thud. Eleanor gasped, stumbling backward until her back hit the wall of medical cabinets. Samuel remained frozen, his scientific mind desperately seeking rational explanation, while his eyes registered the impossible. "This cannot be happening," he whispered, his voice barely audible even in the deathly quiet of the morgue. The military file accompanying the twins was sparse, but contained one detail that now seemed sinister rather than simply clinical. A single line, written in Mengele's precise handwriting, read, "Experiment 17 successful. Twin subjects demonstrate sustained neural activity post-mortem. The Führer will be pleased with our progress." What had initially seemed like the delusional notes of a madman now took on a horrifying new context. Had Mengele somehow found a way to preserve consciousness after death? Samuel approached the examination table again, this time with extreme caution. Eleanor remained pressed against the cabinets, her medical training temporarily overcome by primal fear. "We need to document this," Samuel said, his scientific curiosity gradually overriding his terror. He reached for the camera they used to document autopsy findings. As the flash illuminated the room, both twins' eyelids fluttered simultaneously. Eleanor let out a strangled cry, sliding down the wall until she sat crumpled on the floor, her eyes wide with horror. The eyes of both twins opened fully, revealing identical pale blue irises. They did not blink or move, simply stared upward at the harsh examination lights. Samuel fought the urge to flee, forcing himself instead to lean closer, notebook in hand. "My God," he breathed. "The pupils are responsive to light." He waved his hand between the light and one twin's face, watching as the pupil contracted. This was not rigor mortis or some post-mortem muscle spasm. This was active biological response in clinically dead tissue. What Mengele had done to these children went beyond the already horrific experiments documented in other files. According to the fragmented notes Samuel had reviewed, the twins had been subjected to a series of injections containing compounds derived from South American plant toxins, electrical stimulation to specific brain regions, and exposure to experimental radiation. The purpose appeared to be the creation of what Mengele called sustained consciousness, a state where neural activity continued despite clinical death. The notes suggested this was intended as a means to extract information from prisoners even after conventional interrogation methods had resulted in death. Eleanor finally regained enough composure to join Samuel at the examination table. Her hands still trembled, but professional curiosity was beginning to overcome terror. "We need to check for vital signs," she whispered. Samuel nodded, reaching for his stethoscope. He placed it against the chest of the first twin, listening intently. Nothing. No heartbeat, no respiration. He moved to the second twin with the same result. By every conventional definition, these children were dead. Yet their eyes tracked his movements, and occasional twitches animated their limbs. The laughter came again, soft and childlike, emanating from both bodies without any movement of their lips. It filled the room like a physical presence, causing the hairs on the back of Samuel's neck to stand on end. "Where is the sound coming from?" Eleanor whispered, her voice barely audible. Samuel shook his head. "It seems to be coming from inside them, but that's physically impossible without lung function or laryngeal movement." The military officer who had delivered the bodies, Major Thomas Blackwood, chose that moment to return to the morgue. He entered with brisk efficiency that faltered immediately upon seeing the open eyes of the twins and the horrified expressions of the doctors. "What in God's name?" he gasped, dropping the additional files he had brought. Papers scattered across the floor, but no one moved to retrieve them. "They're responding to stimuli, Major," Samuel explained, struggling to maintain professional detachment. Despite having no vital signs, Major Blackwood approached cautiously, his military bearing momentarily forgotten. "Are you saying they're alive?" he asked, keeping his distance from the examination table. "Not alive," Eleanor corrected, her scientific mind beginning to process the unprecedented phenomenon before them. "But not entirely dead either. It's as if their neural pathways are still active despite the absence of other biological functions." Samuel picked up one of the papers that had fallen near his feet. It contained photographs of Mengele's laboratory where the twins had been found. In one image, visible behind glass specimen jars, was a strange apparatus. Wires connected to what appeared to be a modified electroencephalogram machine. But unlike standard medical equipment, this one had been augmented with components that Samuel didn't recognize. "I think I understand part of what he was doing," Samuel said slowly. "He was measuring brain activity after death, but also potentially stimulating it artificially." As if responding to his words, both twins turned their heads simultaneously to look directly at Samuel. The movement was jerky but deliberate. Eleanor let out a small scream, clapping her hand over her mouth. Even Major Blackwood took several steps back, his hand instinctively moving toward the holster at his hip. "They understand us," Samuel whispered, a cold wave of realization washing over him. What happened next would haunt the dreams of everyone present for the remainder of their lives. The lips of both twins began to move in perfect synchronization, forming words without sound. Samuel leaned closer, straining to understand. The lips moved again, more deliberately this time. Though no breath passed through them, the shape of the words was unmistakable. "Help us!" Major Blackwood's face drained of all color. "This stops now," he said, his voice tight with controlled panic. "We need to contain this situation before word gets out." Eleanor looked at him sharply. "These are children, Major," she protested. "Whatever has been done to them, they're asking for help." Samuel remained silent, his mind racing through possibilities, each more disturbing than the last. Further examination revealed something even more inexplicable. When Samuel finally gathered the courage to make the first incision on the first twin's chest, he discovered tissue that should have been necrotic, but instead appeared fresh, almost living. More disturbing still, when he extracted a small sample and placed it under the microscope, he observed cellular activity that defied explanation. The cells were dividing and moving despite the absence of blood flow or oxygen. "It's as if the cells have been programmed to function independently of the body's central systems," Samuel explained, his voice steady despite the horror of what he was describing. "They don't require conventional life support." Eleanor peered through the microscope, her scientific curiosity momentarily overriding her fear. "This is impossible," she whispered. "Cells cannot function this way." Major Blackwood had been making urgent telephone calls from the morgue office. He returned looking grim. "Orders from the top," he announced. "This entire situation is now classified at the highest level. No one outside this room is to know what we've witnessed. A special containment team is being dispatched." Samuel straightened, removing his gloves with deliberate calm. "With all due respect, Major, these children, whatever has happened to them, deserve proper scientific investigation, not military containment." The Major's expression hardened. "These are not children anymore, Doctor. They're evidence of enemy weapons research with potentially catastrophic implications." Eleanor stepped forward, her initial fear now replaced with determination. "They asked for help," she insisted. "That indicates consciousness, awareness of suffering. We have an ethical obligation." The Major cut her off with a sharp gesture. "Your ethical obligations ended the moment those things opened their eyes, Doctor. This is now a matter of national security." As if to punctuate his words, the laughter came again, this time louder, more unsettling, with an undercurrent that raised goosebumps on everyone's arms. It echoed through the morgue, seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere simultaneously. Samuel began to notice something else disturbing. Whenever the twins laughed or attempted to communicate, the temperature in the room dropped dramatically. His breath became visible in the suddenly frigid air, and frost patterns began to form on the metal surfaces of the examination table. "They're drawing energy from their environment," he realized aloud, "converting thermal energy into whatever is powering their neural functions." A more thorough review of Mengele's notes revealed the true horror of what had been done to the twins. They had not been simply killed and reanimated. They had been systematically transformed through a process that Mengele called entanglement. The Nazi doctor had become obsessed with quantum theory and its potential applications to human consciousness. His deranged hypothesis was that identical twins shared quantum entanglement at the neural level, and that this connection could be exploited to create a consciousness that existed between bodies rather than within them. He wasn't trying to reanimate corpses, Samuel explained, his voice hollow as he translated the German notes. He was trying to create a shared consciousness that could exist independently of biological functions. The twins were his perfect subjects because their brains were already naturally synchronized at the quantum level. Eleanor shook her head in disbelief. That's not science. That's mysticism dressed up in scientific language. Yet the evidence before them suggested Mengele had achieved something unprecedented, if not exactly what he had intended. The twins' individual consciousnesses appeared to remain intact, but trapped in bodies that were clinically dead, yet somehow prevented from complete biological shutdown. It was a state of perpetual limbo. Not life, but not the release of death either. As night fell, the situation grew more disturbing. The movements of the twins became more coordinated and deliberate. Their hands began to twitch in patterns that Samuel eventually recognized as Morse code. Working feverishly, he translated their message. "W-E cannot die." The implications were too horrible to contemplate. These children had been dead for months, yet their consciousness remained intact, aware, trapped. Major Blackwood's containment team arrived shortly after midnight. 4 stern-faced men in unmarked military uniforms, accompanied by a scientist who introduced himself only as Dr. Werner. He examined the twins with clinical detachment, nodding occasionally as if confirming something he already knew. "Remarkable," he muttered. "Mengele actually succeeded." The casual way he said it sent chills down Samuel's spine. "You knew about this research," Samuel accused, unable to keep the disgust from his voice. Dr. Werner didn't bother to deny it. "Theoretical awareness only," he replied smoothly, "part of our intelligence gathering on enemy scientific developments." Eleanor stepped between them, her face flushed with anger. "These are children who have been tortured in ways that defy comprehension. They deserve dignity, not to be treated as weapons technology." Dr. Werner regarded her coldly. "Your humanitarian concerns are noted, Doctor, but ultimately irrelevant. What we're dealing with here is potentially the most significant scientific breakthrough of the century. The applications are endless." Major Blackwood nodded in agreement. "Think of the intelligence possibilities alone. Operatives who could continue providing information even after conventional death." Samuel felt sick. "You're talking about perpetuating this abomination? Creating more victims like these children?" Dr. Werner smiled thinly. "I'm talking about learning from our enemy's research. Surely you wouldn't suggest we simply discard valuable scientific data, regardless of its source?" Before Samuel could respond, one of the military men approached with a metal container. Its interior was lined with lead and cooled by some mechanism Samuel couldn't identify. "We'll be taking the specimens now," Dr. Werner announced. Samuel stepped in front of the examination table. "These aren't specimens. They're victims, and they've asked for help." Major Blackwood's patience visibly thinned. "Step aside, Dr. Harris. That's an order." Eleanor joined Samuel, forming a human barrier. "At least tell us what you intend to do with them," she demanded. Dr. Werner sighed as if dealing with particularly slow students. "They will be transported to a secure facility for comprehensive study. Their condition presents unique research opportunities." Samuel's hands clenched into fists. "Their condition is one of perpetual suffering. They need release, not more experimentation." For a moment, no one spoke. Then came the laughter again, no longer childlike, but twisted, distorted, filling the room with its unsettling resonance. The twins' eyes, which had been staring vacantly, suddenly focused with terrifying intensity on Dr. Werner. Their bodies began to convulse, not with the random movements of seizure, but with coordinated, almost mechanical precision. The temperature in the room plummeted so rapidly that the metal instruments frosted over instantly. One of the military men cried out as his exposed skin began to blister from the extreme cold. "Contain them now!" Dr. Werner shouted, backing toward the door. 2 soldiers moved forward with the lead container, but stopped abruptly as the lights began to flicker. In the strobing darkness, Samuel saw something impossible. The twins were sitting upright, their movements perfectly synchronized. Their lips moved in unison, forming words that Samuel could barely make out. Not again. Never again. What followed could only be described as chaos. The lights exploded in showers of sparks, plunging the room into darkness, broken only by the emergency lights. In the dim red glow, Samuel saw the twins standing beside the examination table, an impossibility given the state of their bodies. Major Blackwood drew his sidearm, firing 2 shots that echoed deafeningly in the confined space. The bullets passed through the twins without effect, embedding themselves in the wall behind. Dr. Werner was screaming orders, though his voice sounded strange, higher-pitched, almost like that of a frightened child. The soldiers attempted to deploy some kind of containment device, but their movements became increasingly uncoordinated. Samuel grabbed Eleanor's arm, pulling her toward the door. "We need to get out," he urged. She resisted, her eyes fixed on the twins. "They're just children," she whispered, "terrified children." In that moment, Samuel made a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. Instead of fleeing, he approached the twins, hands raised in a gesture of peace. "We want to help you," he said softly. "Tell us how." The twins turned to him in perfect unison, their eyes now glowing faintly in the dim light. When they spoke, it was with a single voice that seemed to bypass his ears and resonate directly in his mind. "We cannot die," they said. "He made us this way, but we can move." Their gaze shifted to Dr. Werner, who was now pressed against the far wall, his face contorted in terror. From vessel to vessel. As the twins spoke these words, Dr. Werner began to convulse, his body jerking in the same mechanical manner the twins had displayed moments before. His eyes rolled back, then focused again, now the same pale blue as the twins. Major Blackwood fired again, this time at Dr. Werner. The scientist collapsed, blood pooling beneath him. For a moment, silence reigned in the morgue. Then came the laughter again, now emanating from the Major himself. His expression transformed from shock to an unsettling smile identical to the one worn by the twins. "New vessel," he said, his voice now carrying the same childlike quality. "Better." Eleanor screamed as the Major raised his weapon, firing methodically at each of the remaining soldiers. Samuel tackled her to the ground as bullets ricocheted around them. They crawled behind the examination table, the cold metal providing minimal cover. "The twins, their consciousness is transferring between bodies," Samuel whispered, his mind struggling to process the impossible events unfolding. "How is this happening?" Eleanor gasped, her scientific worldview crumbling in the face of undeniable evidence. Samuel had no answer. Nothing in his medical training or scientific background provided a framework for what they were witnessing. The sounds of gunfire ceased, replaced by the soft padding of footsteps approaching their hiding place. Major Blackwood, or whatever now controlled his body, peered down at them, head tilted at an unnatural angle. "You tried to help," he said, his voice containing echoes of multiple children speaking in unison. "Others only hurt, cut, burned, tested." His finger tightened on the trigger, then relaxed. "You, different. You, live, tell story. Make sure no more children become like us." With that cryptic message, the Major's body stiffened, then collapsed like a puppet with its strings cut. The temperature in the room gradually returned to normal. Samuel and Eleanor remained frozen in place for what felt like hours, but was likely only minutes, waiting for some new horror to manifest. When nothing happened, they cautiously emerged from their hiding place. The bodies of Dr. Werner and the soldiers lay where they had fallen. The major's body showed no signs of life. No pulse, no respiration. The twins remained on the examination table, their expressions once again peaceful, eyes closed as if in sleep. The only evidence of the night's events was the bullet holes in the walls and the lifeless bodies on the floor. "We need to destroy them," Samuel said quietly, looking at the twins. "Not just their bodies. We need to ensure whatever Mengele created can never be studied or replicated." Eleanor nodded slowly, her face pale but resolute. "Cremation," she suggested. "Complete incineration." Without waiting for confirmation, she began gathering the scattered notes and files, including those brought by Dr. Werner. They worked methodically, removing all trace of Mengele's research. The bodies of the twins were transported to the hospital's crematorium, where Samuel personally oversaw their incineration. As the flames consumed the small bodies, he thought he heard, one final time, the sound of children laughing. Not the distorted, unsettling laughter from before, but genuine, joyful release. The official report, filed 3 days later, stated that the twin specimens had been too degraded for proper examination and were disposed of according to standard protocol. The deaths of Major Blackwood, Dr. Werner, and the 4 soldiers were attributed to an oxygen system malfunction that had caused hallucinations and violent behavior. Eleanor resigned from her position shortly afterward, moving to a small town in Maine where she lived in relative seclusion until her death in 1984. Samuel Harris continued his work, though he never again participated in examinations related to Nazi experimentation. His colleagues noted a change in him, a hesitancy to dismiss unusual phenomena, a willingness to consider explanations beyond the strictly material. He never spoke publicly about what happened that night, but his personal journal, discovered after his death in 1973, contained a detailed account that his family chose not to publish. The most disturbing aspect of the journal was its final entry, written the night before Samuel died of an apparent heart attack. It read, simply, "I heard them again today. The laughter. It's closer now. I think they've found me." His body was discovered the next morning, his face frozen in an expression of terror. The medical examiner noted an unusual detail that was subsequently removed from the official report. Samuel's eyes, normally brown, had changed to pale blue. In 2005, during the renovation of the facility that had once housed the morgue, construction workers discovered a sealed metal box hidden within the wall where the bullets had struck that night. Inside was a single vial containing a viscous blue fluid and a note in Samuel's handwriting. "If found, destroy immediately. Do not open. Do not study. Some knowledge is too dangerous." The box was turned over to government authorities, and its current whereabouts remain classified. Reports persist, even today, of identical twins in various parts of the world exhibiting unusual synchronicities, moving in perfect unison without visual cues, sharing thoughts without speaking, and, in rare cases, continuing to show signs of consciousness even after one twin has clinically died. Most medical professionals dismiss these accounts as coincidence or grief-induced hallucination. But occasionally, in the quiet halls of certain research facilities, the sound of children laughing can be heard where no children are present. Could Mengele's twisted experiments have created something that continues to exist beyond conventional understanding? Did those twins find a way to persist, moving from vessel to vessel, as they claimed? And perhaps most disturbing of all, are there others like them, products of experiments whose records were destroyed or hidden away, waiting to be discovered? If you've experienced unusual phenomena involving twins, or heard unexplained children's laughter in places where no children should be? Share your story in the comments below. Remember to like and subscribe for more historical investigations into science's darkest chapters. And remember, some mysteries are perhaps better left unsolved, some knowledge better left undiscovered. The boundary between life and death was never meant to be crossed.